He jumped mid-flight over Budapest and vanished. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I appreciate them all. Wolfe follows a trail that fell from the sky. If there's one thing you learn working for Nero Wolfe, it's that trouble doesn't show up in a polite hat. Most days it climbs the brownstone steps with a story that smells like yesterday's fish and expects Archie Goodwin to take it seriously. That Tuesday, in late October, I was at my desk in the front room when Fritz called from the hall that someone was at the door. I went out expecting the usual catalogue. What I got was a tall, narrow man in a raincoat that had gone from grey to city brown. Blood streaked his left temple, but his eyes were steady and too awake, the look of a guy who hasn't slept because he's been running from something that keeps up. He stepped into the foyer, then stopped dead. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, not asking so much as grabbing at the word. "Upstairs," I told him. "But before you decorate my floor any further, who are you and why are you bleeding on my boss's staircase?" "I fell," he said quickly. The accent was Central European, softened by time in New York. "In the street. It is nothing. I must speak to Nero Wolfe. Now. Name? Martin Havel." He handed me a damp card that said translator and an East Side address. "You will be paid," he added, as if I were already turning him out. "Sit down and let Fritz patch that." "No," the words snapped. "If I sit, I may not stand again." Maybe drama, but the kind you don't fake while swaying on your feet. I took him upstairs. Wolfe was in the office, wedged behind his desk like a large idol. He was reading, which meant he had already decided the world could wait. "Sir," I said, "this gentleman insists on seeing you and is leaking." Wolfe let 5 seconds pass, then lifted his eyes to Havel with that calm weight that makes people remember their manners. "You presume," he said. Havel swallowed and came forward a step. "I beg your indulgence. It is a matter of life, perhaps of death. Not mine." He wiped at the blood. "There is a man who jumped at Budapest." Wolfe's brow rose a notch. "Budapest is not in New York." "No, it was Budapest. 3 months ago. The chain bridge. Midnight. The man jumped from it into the Danube." Havel talked faster now. "He survived. People said he was a fool, a lover, a spy. I was there. He was none of those. He was frightened. Yesterday he appeared in Manhattan. This morning he is gone. But he left something with me. And because he left it, men are following me. Men who do not ask, only take." Wolfe closed his book. "You arrive here injured and tell me of a river in Hungary and men in Manhattan. I am not moved." "You will be," Havel said. He reached into his coat and produced a small leather notebook, rain-dark and scuffed. He set it on Wolfe's desk carefully. "This is his. I do not know what is inside. I do not dare to read it. He told me if anything happened, I must bring it to Nero Wolfe, only to you. He said you would understand why a man would jump at Budapest." Wolfe did not touch the notebook. "Who is this man?" "He called himself Thomas Varga. That is not his name. He said the real one would kill him." Havel's eyes flicked to the door. "They came to my flat at dawn. I escaped down the back stairs. I ran here. If you refuse, I will leave. They will take this, and perhaps more than this. He was afraid in Budapest and afraid here, and he trusted you." Wolfe leaned back, tasting the word. "Archie," he said, "find me a reason to be interested." I looked at Havel's temple. People don't crack their heads open on sidewalks without help, and they don't choose our address by accident. The notebook sat there, breathing rainwater. "For starters," I said, "somebody hauled a man out of a river, followed him across an ocean, and now they're sniffing around your orchids. That's a disturbance you don't usually ignore." Wolfe stared at me as if I had suggested he take up tap dancing. Then his gaze returned to Havel, and the air got a shade cooler. "You say men are following you. How many, and who?" "I do not know who," Havel said. "2 this morning at my door, another in the street, a sedan that kept too close. When I turned toward 48th, I saw it again. They are not police. Why not go to the police? Wolfe asked. Havel's mouth tightened. Because Varga said if the police touched the notebook, I would die in a clean room and Hungary would never hear my name. I don't know if that is true, but I believed he believed it. And I have seen police in Budapest, and I have seen police here. Each can be used. Wolfe's lips compressed. You have eaten? Havel blinked. No. Then you will take food. Fritz will attend to your injury. Archie will speak with you in the front room. I will consider. He nodded at me, which in Wolfe language is a shove. Downstairs, with Havel in the red leather chair while Fritz swabbed his temple, I pulled a pad from my desk. Start at Budapest. He talked in slow pieces. 3 months earlier, he had been freelancing for a New York foundation, translating statements for a European housing project. He'd gone to Budapest to help a Hungarian lawyer make noise about corruption in riverfront redevelopment. At one of the meetings, a man in the back listened without speaking until the room cleared. That man introduced himself later as Thomas Varga. Not a lawyer, not a developer, just someone who knew too much. You saw him jump? I asked. Yes. Midnight on the chain bridge. I shouted. He smiled back as if apologizing. Then he went over. And he lived. Fishermen pulled him out downstream, in hospital a week. I visited once. He said he jumped because it was the only move that wasn't expected. He said in a game with a fixed board, you must leave the board. I thought he was delirious. Later he was gone. The lawyer said he never existed. So why was he in New York yesterday? He found me at a cafe on 2nd Avenue. I almost dropped my cup. He was thinner and wore an American coat, but it was him. He said he owed me for witnessing the jump. He asked me to keep the notebook for 1 day only. If he didn't return by noon today, there would be no returning at all. And he told you to bring it to Wolfe if anything happened. Yes. Did he say why Wolfe? He said you cannot be bought with fear, only with facts. He said you would know how to use the facts without being used by them. Havel spread his hands. He spoke of you as a fortress. Describe Varga. Clothes, manner, anything that sticks. Medium height, scar at the right jaw, eyes that watched corners instead of faces. His English was precise, almost bookish. He smelled faintly of cloves. He stayed about 20 minutes, long enough to pass the notebook and a brass key to a locker at Grand Central. Then he said, "Tell Wolfe the man who jumped at Budapest did it twice," and walked out. Fritz finished and sent Havel to the guest room to sleep under Wolfe's roof. I went upstairs with my notes. Wolfe was alone, the notebook still untouched. He listened, then sat silent a full minute. "A key to a locker," he said. "You will retrieve its contents. Right after I check the cafe and see if anyone there remembers a clove-scented ghost. Do both. Take Saul Panzer if you feel a need. I'll start without him." I nodded at the notebook on his desk. "Still think it's bait?" "It may be. Bait is examined only when the hook is visible." His eyes were steady. "But it has already disturbed my house. That is sufficient to proceed." That was Wolfe admitting interest without admitting it. I headed for the stairs, and the bell downstairs rang sharply down below. I paused, listening, and wondered who found our address. I went down 2 steps at a time. The doorbell was still humming in my ears when I reached the front room, ready for Inspector Kramer or a crank with a bill. Instead, I found a woman in a camel hair coat that cost more than my first car. 40s, controlled, the kind of face that knew cameras. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. "That's me. Come in before the rain votes itself resident. I need to see Nero Wolfe, now." "You're in line. Name?" "Ilona Shekely. It concerns Thomas Varga." That lifted the day's eyebrows. "Have a seat." "I will stand." Her eyes took the room in, exits and angles. "Is Wolfe here?" "Upstairs. Start with why Varga concerns you." "He belongs to me." "People don't belong to anybody." "He's my husband. Separated. not divorced. He disappeared in Budapest in August. Yesterday I heard he was in New York. This morning I was told he's dead. A man said Wolfe is already involved. Which man? Bella Peregni, vice consul. He said a body was pulled from the Hudson, believed to be Thomas. He described a scar on the right jaw. He told me to come here before the police did. She leaned closer. Is Thomas here? No. Then someone has him, or had him. They won't stop with him. I took that upstairs. Wolfe heard it, then said, "Bring her." He didn't sound grateful. She followed me up like she'd walked the steps before. Wolfe regarded her a moment. "Mrs. Seckley, sit." She sat because Wolfe's voice makes it easier than arguing. "You know my name," she said. I was informed. "You are the wife of Thomas Varga." "Yes." "And you were told he's dead." "I was told. I don't claim to know." "By Vice Consul Peregni." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Why would a consular officer call you about a body in the Hudson?" "Because Thomas was not only a husband. He knew things in Budapest that men with titles prefer forgotten. The consulate has long ears." "You were not with him on the chain bridge?" "No, I was in Vienna. He told me afterward in hospital. He said men with badges wanted him to sign a confession. He jumped to buy time." "What confession?" "That he stole a notebook from Karoli Barta. Barta is a developer, a political animal. Thomas kept his books. When redevelopment funds vanished, they needed a thief. Thomas refused to be one, so he left the bridge." She watched Wolfe's face. He survived, then vanished. Wolfe reached for the leather notebook Havel had brought and let his fingers open it. He still didn't read. "Do you know what this contains?" "No, but Thomas spoke of lists, payments, shell companies, names. He said if the book surfaced, careers would drown. Who besides Barta would wish it suppressed? Barta had partners. 2 in the ministry, 1 in a bank, 1 in the construction union. I know their faces. Thomas knew their accounts. That is why he was hunted." Her voice tightened. "And why I'm frightened." Wolfe's eyes drifted, thinking of Budapest and Manhattan in one breath. "You say Thomas trusted me, yet he never came." "He did." She met his gaze. "He said if he reached New York, he would go to Nero Wolfe. Last night I waited for his call. It never came. I could feel the brownstone tightening around us the way it does when outside trouble tries the lock. Mrs. Seckley's hands were folded in her lap, but the knuckles showed white. Wolfe's face stayed bland, yet I knew he was marking her every word against Havel's. 2 stories, 1 notebook, and now a husband who might be a corpse or a bargaining chip. Before Wolfe could answer, Fritz appeared at the office door. "Herr Wolfe, there is a gentleman downstairs who says he is police." Wolfe didn't move. "Send him up." Footsteps climbed. Inspector Kramer filled the doorway, wet hat in hand, hard face in place. Behind him was a slimmer man in a dark suit, wary eyes, the kind that belonged to the diplomatic class. Kramer took in me, Wolfe, and Mrs. Seckley. "Well," he said, "looks like you've been busy without me." Saul met me under the clock with his hat tilted like he'd been born in its shadow. He wasn't big, but he was solid, and when he walked, you had the sense he could go through a wall if the wall insulted Wolfe. We crossed the concourse fast, not admiring architecture. The locker key Havel had given me was old brass with a stamped number. We found the row in the East Gallery. I slid the key in, turned, and the door popped. Inside was a flat brown parcel wrapped in twine and on top a smaller envelope. I took the envelope first. It held a single card. No signature, just a line in Hungarian and its English twin. For the man who jumped twice, the third fall is the last. Saul read over my shoulder. "That's a threat," he said. "Or a schedule," I muttered, and lifted the parcel. Before I could open it, Saul caught my sleeve. "Archie, 2 men." Reflections in the polished floor showed a pair angling toward us, not hurrying, not sightseeing. One wore a tan trench and carried his left arm too still. The other was thick through the chest and kept his eyes on my hands. We were boxed between lockers and foot traffic. I dropped the parcel into my briefcase and shut the locker. We walked out like we'd simply changed our minds. The two men followed with the patience of cats. Saul murmured, "We go to the taxi stand, then cut left at the news kiosk. I'll deal with them if they close." At the kiosk, the thick one sped up. I saw his hand dip toward his coat, and Saul pivoted as if he'd rehearsed it. He bumped the man's shoulder hard, spun him, and planted a forearm across his throat, while the crowd practiced blindness. The thin one tried to swing around, but Saul's heel clipped his ankle, and he went down on his knee. "Gentlemen," Saul said, "you're in no shape for ballet. Go home." The thick one grabbed for Saul's ribs. Saul shifted, used the grab as leverage, and the man stumbled into a stack of magazines. Paper fanned. A clerk started yelling. Saul let go and stepped back. The two men regrouped, embarrassed and suddenly aware of cameras and uniforms. They melted into commuters. Outside, rain had eased to a cold mist. We took a cab. Saul in front to watch the mirrors. Me in back with the briefcase like it held a newborn. I didn't open it until we hit 9th Avenue. The parcel was a folder, oilcloth wrapped, with a memory stick taped inside and a sheaf of photocopied ledgers. The first page listed companies with addresses in Budapest, Vienna, and too many in Delaware. Next to each was a column of dates and amounts. The totals were in euros, but the transfers ran through a New York bank I knew, Sutter and Vale. "Wolfe won't like that name," Saul said when I told him. "Nope, that means the game board isn't just on the Danube." Back at the brownstone, Fritz let us in with the kind of quiet that says he knows trouble is allergic to noise. Wolfe waited in the office, expression blank. I handed him the folder and the stick. He glanced at the threat card, then at me. "You are followed." "Sure. Amateurish, but with intentions." Saul educated them. Wolfe grunted, then opened the ledgers. His eyes went to the bank name and stayed there longer. "Sutter and Vale is represented by attorneys who dine too expensively in this city," he said. "If their fingerprints are on Hungarian corruption, we are in it fully." He didn't look at me when he said it, but I felt the hook settle. Wolfe hates being used, and he hates being surprised even more. He flipped 2 pages, then shut the folder as if sealing a verdict. "This is only the map," he said. "We will need the men who drew it, and the reason they drew it." The doorbell rang downstairs. Twice, polite but insistent. Fritz went and returned. "Herr Wolfe, there is a young man. He says he is with Sutter and Vale." The young man was young enough to still believe a pressed tie could solve anything. Blonde, earnest, carrying a leather portfolio like a shield, he let me bring him up and park him in the client chair. Wolfe didn't bother with preliminaries. "Your name?" "Ethan Rusk. Associate Counsel, Sutter and Vale." He tried a smile and got no traction. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm here on behalf of my employer and a client, Mr. Karoli Barta." Wolfe's chin lifted a millimeter. "Mr. Barta is in Budapest." "He is, but he retained us in New York for coordination with American entities. This morning we heard that documents belonging to him, ledgers and correspondence, may be in your possession." "So?" Wolfe said. "So they are stolen property. We request their immediate return. If you comply, the matter ends." Rusk slid a typed letter across the desk. "This is a formal demand." I read it. Respectable threats, litigation, injunction, police involvement. Wolfe didn't look down. "Mr. Rusk, are you acquainted with Thomas Varga?" His eyes flickered. "No." "Are you acquainted with Ilona Shekeli?" "No, sir." "Are you acquainted with Martin Havel?" Rusk's mouth tightened. "I know of a translator named Havel who worked in Budapest. I've never met him." Wolfe folded the letter once and set it aside like a napkin. "Your employer is insolent. Sit or leave. If you leave, you will do so empty-handed. He sat. Sweat showed at his hairline. Wolfe opened the locker folder and turned it so Rusk could see the routing sheet with Sutter and Vale's name. You recognize this? Rusk stared. It looks like an internal banking instrument. I don't handle. You need not handle. You need only speak truthfully. Why are transfers from Budapest redevelopment funds passing through accounts your firm supervises in New York? Rusk swallowed. I don't know. If they are, they were part of lawful international investment vehicles. Lawful. Wolfe's eyes stayed on him. Then why send men to intercept my assistant at Grand Central? Rusk jerked back. What men? We sent no one. I was instructed to come here peacefully. This is the first I've heard of any pursuit. Perhaps you are not informed. That is plausible. Wolfe's voice remained mild. Who in your firm works directly with Mr. Barter? Partner in charge is Celia Drift. She oversees the Budapest file. Day-to-day is Paul Larkin, senior counsel. Celia Drift, Wolfe muttered. A conscience so polished it reflects only herself. Rusk looked baffled. She's respected. Respected by whom? Wolfe leaned forward a fraction. A body has been pulled from the Hudson that may be Thomas Varga. Another man has been assaulted for carrying a notebook tied to this affair. If your client is innocent, he is in peril. If he is guilty, he has exported his guilt here. Either way, my house has been disturbed, and I will not be paid with legal stationery. Rusk's voice went thin. What do you want from me? Information, cooperation, names beyond your firm. Wolfe tapped the ledger. Who are Barter's American partners? I don't know them all. There's a holding company, Danube Meridian LLC. It has investors here. I've seen a contact list. He hesitated, then added. Victor Haynes, Rena Kroll. I think they sit on the board. Wolfe nodded once. Write those names, addresses, and phone numbers. Then call Ms. Drift and tell her Mr. Wolfe is now involved. Do not embellish. Rusk stared, caught between fear and obedience. If I do that, I'll be fired. You may be dead otherwise. He looked at me for confirmation. I offered a harmless shrug. Rusk took a pen, hands shaking, and began to write. He wrote fast, as if speed might keep the ink from incriminating him. When he finished, Wolfe took the page, scanned it, and passed it to me for copying. Now the call, he said. I slid him the house phone. Rusk dialed, listening to the ring with hollow eyes. When Celia Drift answered, he spoke carefully, saying only that he had met Wolfe and that Wolfe held materials tied to Barter. He paused, went paler at what she said, then managed, "Yes, ma'am," and hung up without looking at us. Wolfe smiled slightly. The trap closed. Rusk left looking like a man who'd swallowed a bell and couldn't stop it ringing. Wolfe watched the door close, then turned to me. Archie, you will go to Sutter and Vale. Not as yourself. Observe. Learn whether Mr. Larkin and Mrs. Drift are prey or predators. And the list of American partners. Begin with Mr. Haynes. He's likely the hinge on this side. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. If Thomas Varga is alive, he will reach for a hinge. If he is dead, the hinge will creak. I called Saul, gave him the two names, and told him to take Kroll. He said he'd already found her address in a registry and was on his way. That left me with Victor Haynes, a philanthropic shark whose picture I'd seen in business pages, smiling over ribbon cuttings. I took a cab to Midtown East. Haynes's building had a lobby that could smell a lie through glass. He was in a corner office on the 42nd floor, the kind of perch you can buy when you own enough of other people's perches for his money. His assistant made me wait 10 minutes, then let me in because I said I was from a Hungarian cultural trust and dropped names from the file Wolfe had skimmed. Haynes rose to greet me. Late 50s, tan that ignored seasons, suit like armor. Budapest, you say, he said smoothly. Always delighted to support the arts there. What can I do? What you've been doing, I said, keeping my voice bland. Danube Meridian is under review. We're verifying investors. His smile didn't slip, but it tightened. That's handled by counsel. Sutter and Vale. If there are questions, they can answer them. I'm afraid counsel may have interests of their own. Did you know a man named Thomas Varga? A beat? No. Karoli Barta. Met him once at a conference. Why? Because Varga has disappeared, possibly murdered, and his papers suggest Meridian is a conduit for diverted public funds. That got a flicker at last. Not fear, more irritation at being bothered. Young man, you're accusing me of international fraud in my office. I'd advise you to choose your words more carefully. I'm choosing my questions. If your investment is clean, you'll want the thief found before the trail cools. Haynes leaned back and studied me. You're not from any cultural trust. Your tie is from Macy's, and you look like you sleep in taxis. His voice stayed pleasant. Who sent you? I grinned. A very large man who dislikes having his house disturbed. Name of Wolfe. The pleasantness evaporated. Wolfe, that old mountebank, he has stolen documents that belong to my partner. He's extorting us. Maybe. But if you and Barta are partners, your partner's running scared enough to jump off a bridge. Twice. That's not a relaxed business plan. Haynes stood. Get out. Sure. One more thing. If Varga contacts you, you call Wolfe. Not Drift, not Larkin, nobody in Budapest. If you don't, you'll be the next one reading about bodies in the river. His jaw went hard. You are threatening me. I'm forecasting. Different line of work. I left before security got to practice. On the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Saul. Kroll's a stiff sort, he said. Lives on the Upper West Side. She says she's never heard of Varga, but she got nervous when I mentioned Budapest. Wants to see Wolfe tonight with her lawyer. Good. That makes it a triangle. Anything else? Yeah. She's got a security guy tailing her. Big, neat ex-military. I clocked him anyway. Somebody's already leaning on her. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without moving, fingers steepled. Haynes is bluffing. He may attempt to retrieve the documents by force. We will not permit that. Bring Mr. Haynes and Miss Kroll here tomorrow. And Miss Drift, if she refuses, I will entice her. How? He looked at the notebook. By returning what she seeks. In part. Tonight you will send her a photocopy of the first ledger page, with my compliments. That will disturb her more than my refusal. Risky, I said. Necessary. Wolfe's eyes were cold. We must tighten the circle before it tightens on us. Wolfe had me make the copy myself, which is his way of saying he trusts me with the scissors, but not the orchids. I photocopied the first page, the one with Danube Meridian's neat columns and the Sutter and Vale stamp, and sent it by courier to Celia Drift with a note Wolfe dictated, a single sentence saying that if she wished to prevent further dissemination, she would attend his office at 11 the next morning. Night settled on the brownstone as if nothing could penetrate the brick except Fritz's cooking. I was still at the table when the front bell rang with a double jab of somebody who thinks the door's theirs. Fritz went, then returned looking displeased. Two gentlemen, Archie. They insist on speaking to you. I went to the hall. The two were not gentlemen unless the word now includes men in identical navy parkas and identical patience. One was the thick commuter from Grand Central. The other had flat eyes. They smiled politely. Mr. Goodwin, the thick one said, we need to retrieve something that doesn't belong in this house. Try the umbrella stand, I told him. He didn't laugh. A notebook. You took it from Budapest. Government business. Government business comes with badges. Flat Eyes slid a hand into his parka. I didn't wait to see what he was fishing for. I stepped back and called, Saul. Saul Panzer came out of the front room without hurry, filling the doorway behind me. The two men recalculated. This is private property. Saul said quietly. You can leave vertical or horizontal. Flat Eyes gave a thin smile. You obstruct an international recovery. There will be consequences. Consequences are upstairs, I said. Take the stairs if you're eager. They chose the sidewalk. I bolted the door. Saul listened a moment. They'll come back, he said. Maybe with warrants, maybe with guns, maybe with lawyers. Upstairs, Wolfe had heard enough through the register to know the shape of it. They are impatient, he said. They're sloppy too. Makes me think the brains aren't here. The brains are in Budapest, Wolfe said. But the hands are here, and hands can strangle. We will give them something to hold. He had me telephone Kramer. It was late. Kramer answered like a man swatting a mosquito. Wolfe told him 2 men had attempted entry and invited him to post a car for the night. Kramer grumbled, then promised a uniform. He also warned he'd return early if the situation turned uglier. At 9:30, Rena Kroll arrived with her lawyer, a narrow fellow named Gilpin. Kroll herself moved like someone with a wire spine. Black coat, silver hair cut close, eyes that preferred to look through you. She sat opposite Wolfe without preliminaries. I'm here because your man Panzer frightened my doorman, she said. He claimed you possessed documents linking me to Budapest corruption. Wolfe inclined his head. I possess documents recording transfers. Your name is attached to certain entities. That is all at present. Gilpin cleared his throat. My client's investments are legitimate. Any appearance otherwise is misinterpretation. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Have you met Karoli Bata? Once. I was invited to a riverfront gala. I declined further involvement after I smelled politics. Have you met Thomas Varga? She hesitated. No. I knew an accountant by that name years ago. Not this man. Yet someone is shadowing you. Her eyes narrowed. How would you know? Because you are not the only one watched. Those who watch you wish to learn what you know. I suspect you know more than you admit. Wolfe's voice stayed gentle. If you cooperate, you may live. If you do not, your security man will not suffice. Kroll's fingers tightened on her purse clasp. What exactly do you want? Tomorrow at 11 you will attend again with Mr. Haynes and Miss Drift. Tonight you will remain in this house for your safety and mine. Gilpin started to object. Kroll lifted a hand. After a long look at Wolfe, she said, Very well. But if this is a trap, Mr. Wolfe, I can afford better ones. Traps are not a matter of expense, Wolfe said. Only of patience. Morning in the brownstone pretended the night hadn't tried to claw its way in. Fritz was humming downstairs. Wolfe was at his desk like a statue that had learned to speak. Rena Kroll came from the south bedroom sharp-eyed and silent, while Saul took his post in the hall. At 10:45, the bell rang. I saw a black sedan and a taxi at the curb. Victor Haynes climbed out first, rain beading on his tan face, and came up the steps with the brisk stride of a man who assumes doors open for him. I took him upstairs. I'm not here for theatrics, he said. Then don't provide any, I told him. Celia Drift arrived a minute later in a slate suit and a smile that could freeze soup. Right behind her was Ethan Rusk, pale and dutiful. The surprise was Vice Consul Perigny, appearing with his umbrella like a badge. I was asked to attend, he said. Wolfe's voice floated down. Bring them in, Archie. At 11, we were seated in Wolfe's office. Wolfe immovable behind the desk, me at mine, Saul at the wall, and in the red leather. Chairs. Haynes, Drift, Kroll, Rusk, Gilpin, and Perigny. The air felt too full. Wolfe spoke softly. You are here because Thomas Varga disappeared and because money meant for Budapest, redevelopment was diverted through Danube Meridian into New York accounts managed by Sutter and Vale. Mr. Haynes and Ms. Kroll invested. Ms. Drift supervised the American channels. Mr. Perigny carries Hungary's interests. We will clarify them. Haynes gave a humorless chuckle. If you're accusing me, Say it straight." "I am stating facts," Wolfe said. "Varga stole a notebook from Karoli Barta to preserve evidence. He jumped from the chain bridge to avoid a false confession. He came to New York to place the evidence beyond reach. He was intercepted." Drift crossed her legs. "You're holding stolen property. Return it and let courts decide." "Courts in Budapest are why he jumped," Wolfe replied. "Last night 2 men tried to enter my house for the notebook. They were not police. Someone here hired criminals." Perigny stiffened. "You imply my office." "I imply your knowledge," Wolfe said, turning to Haynes. "Your investment was not innocent. Barta promised profit and access. When the notebook vanished, profit turned to exposure. You ordered retrieval, and when it failed, you escalated." Kroll leaned forward. "Escalated to murder? Perhaps. The body pulled from the Hudson was meant to be taken for Varga." "It is not." Rusk blurted, "How could you know?" "From a decisive detail," Wolfe said. "The dead man's fingers are nicotine-stained. Varga did not smoke. He used cloves. Paul Larkin, your senior counsel, did smoke. I obtained his photograph and matched the scar. The body is Larkin." Drift's composure dipped. "Conjecture." "Deduction," Wolfe said. "Someone killed Larkin, stripped his wallet, and put him in the river to buy time and frighten Mrs. Seckerly. Mr. Haynes had motive and means." Ms. Drift arranged. "Vice Consul Perigny spread the rumor." Haynes started to rise. Saul shifted 1 step and Haynes sat back, breathing hard. "You're insane. You can't prove that." Wolfe pressed a button. A tape recorder clicked. "Last night, Mr. Goodwin installed a simple cable on your office line with your building's maintenance supervisor. You called Ms. Drift at 9:17 and said, 'Larkin is done, and the river should solve the Varga problem.' It is recorded." Silence thickened. I felt the room tilt in that quiet way it does when Wolfe's net tightens. Nobody breathed except the radiator. Outside, a siren wailed past on 10th Avenue, fading like a warning. Inside, the only sound was Haynes swallowing against his dry throat. Drift stared at Haynes. Perigny looked suddenly old. Kroll's hands tightened. Rusk went pale. Haynes rasped, "That recording is illegal." "Not as illegal as fraud and murder," Wolfe said. "You will telephone Inspector Kramer and confess. If you refuse, I will deliver the tape, the ledgers, and my testimony. Either way, you will face an American court." Haynes's shoulders sagged. He saw no ally. "You set me up." "No," Wolfe said. "You set yourself up." I merely declined to be disturbed in silence. Haynes sat as if the chair had turned to glue. Wolfe's tape recorder waited on the desk like a judge. Haynes reached for his phone with fingers that had never trembled. Saul slid it closer, making the inevitable easier. He dialed Inspector Kramer on speaker. When Kramer answered, Haynes tried for dignity and missed. He admitted hiring men to recover the notebook, telling Drift to handle pressure, meeting Paul Larkin on the Riverwalk, and striking him when Larkin said Varga had slipped away. Kramer listened, then said he was coming with uniforms and Haynes should stay put. Haynes agreed to everything, like a man signing his own receipt. Drift made a small choking sound. "Victor, you idiot," she said, furious at being dragged down. Wolfe didn't glance at her. "Miss Drift, you will also remain. Your duties to Danube Meridian and Mr. Barta are irrelevant. You abetted a killing." She opened her mouth, shut it, and stared at her shoes. Rusk looked as if he might faint, then steadied himself by gripping the arms of his chair, eyes fixed on Drift with a child's dismayed faith. Gilpin whispered to Kroll about counsel and immunity, and she gave him a curt shake of the head, telling him without words that lawyers could wait. Vice Consul Perigny rose, face stiff. "This is outrageous. Hungary will not tolerate. Hungary has tolerated too much. Wolfe cut in. "You will inform your superiors that copies of the notebook go to American and Hungarian anti-corruption offices beyond Mr. Barta's reach. If you obstruct, your name will accompany them." Perenyi sat slowly, beaten by the fact that Wolfe wasn't asking permission. Saul glanced toward the door and then the clock, as if timing how long before consequences arrived, while Wolfe rested a hand on the closed notebook like a man keeping a promise. Rena Kroll's spine stayed straight. She looked at Haynes with cool interest. "Is Thomas alive?" When Wolfe nodded, she let out a breath she had been holding since last night, and her gaze shifted to drift with a kind of icy pity. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Saul received a call at dawn, injured but alive. He will come when safe." The bell rang downstairs. Polite now. Fritz went and returned. "Herr Wolfe, Mrs. Sekeli is here." "With a man." I opened the door on Ilona Sekeli, coat unbuttoned, eyes bright with rain. Beside her stood Thomas Varga, thinner, jaw scar plain. He smiled at me as if apologizing for surviving. Upstairs, the room turned toward him. Drift stared as if at a ghost. Haynes sagged. Thomas bowed slightly. "Mr. Wolfe." "You are late," Wolfe said. "I had to jump again," Thomas replied. "Into the wrong country." Wolfe's brows lifted. Thomas told it plainly. He'd come to New York to place the evidence with Wolfe, but Larkin's men grabbed him near 2nd Avenue and took him to a Red Hook warehouse. Haynes offered money and a ticket back to Budapest for a recantation. When Thomas refused, they beat him and tied him up. Larkin wanted him dead. Haynes panicked, they fought, and Haynes struck Larkin. In the mess, Thomas cut loose, staggered out, and phoned Saul. Ilona listened with her jaw tight, then squeezed his wrist, a silent warning not to play the hero again. When he finished, the air held only wet wool in disgrace. Kramer arrived with 2 detectives, took Haynes and Drift, heard Thomas's statement, and gave Wolfe a look that was half irritation, half respect. After they were gone, Thomas and Ilona sat in the suspect chairs, hands clasped as if relearning each other. Wolfe told Fritz to serve lunch. In the quiet that followed, Wolfe leaned back. "A man who jumps twice does not do so for sport," he said. "He does so because the world insists there is no other move. We have reminded it otherwise." I poured coffee and watched Fritz glide in with trays. If the world learns the lesson, it'll be the first time. Still, not a bad morning for a brownstone that likes peace. Wolfe eyed the roast. "Peace, Archie, is not the absence of disturbance. It is the proper response to it. Now eat." After lunch, the brownstone settled into a quiet that felt earned. Thomas was back in the south bedroom with Ilona posted near the door, a watchful shadow who had decided the world still needed guarding. Fritz had bullied Thomas into broth and a nap. Saul left after Kramer, satisfied in the way a man gets when trouble has been pushed in the right direction. I was at my desk straightening loose ends when Wolfe rang for me. He sat behind the desk, a mountain returned to weather. The notebook lay open now, tagged with slips of paper. "Archie," he said, "make copies of the marked pages. 1 set to the district attorney, 1 to the independent prosecutor in Budapest, 1 to the foundation that employed Mr. Havel." "So Havel wasn't a random translator," I said. "Nothing random climbs my stairs," Wolfe replied. "He has credentials with that foundation. They will shield him when Hungarian influence reaches for him. Arrange a sworn statement from Mr. Varga. Send notice to Mr. Barta that his American partners are under arrest and that further concealment will worsen his case." I set to work. The notebook was the kind of ugly truth paperwork. Loves, company names, dummy addresses, transfer dates, and signatures that matched the dead man's handwriting. Saul's contacts had already located a Budapest anti-corruption unit not owned by Barta's party. I scanned the pages, encrypted them, and sent them off through a channel Fritz pretended not to see. Pavel came downstairs, pale and exhausted. He looked at the staircase as if expecting another pair of boots, then relaxed, when Wolfe's voice drifted down. Wolfe did not come to see him. He didn't need to. The man was already safe under this roof and within reason. By early evening, Kramer called. Drift was singing in custody, and Haynes had demanded a different cell because the lighting made his tan look sickly. The dead man was confirmed as Paul Larkin. "You got there before us," Kramer grumbled. "Your profession is pursuit," Wolfe said into the receiver. "Mine is arrival." He hung up. Dinner was duck with cherries, served on time as if nothing had happened outside Wolfe's chair. Thomas, bandaged but upright, and Ilona joined us. They spoke little, but their silence had the weight of people who had walked too close to an edge and now felt ground again. After coffee, Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, I owe you my life." "You owe me nothing," Wolfe said. "You owed yourself the courage to jump when there was no other move, and the patience to speak when there was. You have done both." Thomas smiled faintly. "In Budapest, I believed no chair could be more powerful than a river." "A river removes obstacles," Wolfe said. "A chair creates them. Panic uses the first. Intellect uses the second. I recommend intellect." Ilona shot Thomas a look. "He means you should not jump again." "I mean," Wolfe said, "that an exit need not be your only door. There are other moves." Near 10, Saul escorted Thomas and Ilona to a safe hotel. Pavel went with them, deciding his future did not include returning to Budapest alone. The brownstone was ours again. I watched taillights smear in the wet street. "You know, nobody's paid you yet." "Payment is a vulgar term," Wolfe said. "Restoration is sufficient." "Try telling that to the grocery bill." "He will arrange a fee through the foundation. It will be modest. I accepted this case because my house was invaded by the consequences of greed. Such invasions must be repelled. Still, you saved a man, toppled a developer, and embarrassed a vice consul. Not bad for staying planted." Wolfe lifted his brandy. "The chair is not idleness, Archie. It is position. When men leap in panic, they surrender position. When one remains, one may direct the leaping. Remember that." "Sure," I said. "Next time I feel like jumping into the Hudson, I'll ask you first." "See that you do," he said, and the corner of his mouth turned up. Outside, the rain eased. Inside, Fritz cleared the table. The orchid slept, and the brownstone, disturbed and restored, slid back into its proper silence.